This segment of the news has been brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.
Welcome back. There is a threat to the Bahamas' existence due to the consequences of climate change, with the United States of America being one of the largest emitters of carbon dioxide, causing the rise in sea level and more intense hurricanes, according to Prime Minister Philip Davis. While speaking at the 56th Sigma Pi Phi Grand Boule held at the Atlantis Resort. Prime Minister Davis, along with former UN Ambassador for the United States, Andrew Young, and former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, took part in a roundtable discussion.
There is an existential threat due to the consequences of climate change, with the United States of America being one of the largest emitters of carbon dioxide, causing the rise in sea level and more intense hurricanes, according to Prime Minister Philip Davis. At the 56th Sigma Pi Phi Grand Boule held at the Grand Ballroom in the Atlantis Resort, the Prime Minister, along with former UN Ambassador for the United States, Andrew Young, and former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, took part in a roundtable discussion.
I listened to President Biden in Glasgow when he was re-engaging the U.S. into the Paris Agreement and recommitting the efforts of the U.S. government to doing what is necessary for the climate change. But it occurred to me that it really wasn't political will, it was political change. Because recalling that President Trump withdrew from the Paris Accord and questioned whether or not climate change is real. So it retarded and rolled back many of the advances that the world is being made, led by the United States. And so we had now a re-engagement, but having to make up for all those lost grounds.
The Prime Minister added that more than 50% of the country's national debt is connected directly to climate change, further explaining the process of having to borrow money for recovery purposes, with Hurricane Dorian costing the Bahamas more than $4 billion in losses and damages. Prime Minister Davis made mention of the upcoming 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, otherwise known as COP27 meeting, hosted in Egypt this year, with the question on his mind being, what has been done since these summits have been held?
They've been talking about this now for how many? 27 years as leaders. But things are getting worse. You're having more wildfires in the United States. You're having floods. Then there are droughts. So what has happened over the last 27 years that the leaders of the world have been gathering to find a solution to this? Yes, the solution is, well, we need to reduce our carbon footprints. But what has the world been doing to do so over the last 27 years when things appear to get worse and worse?
Prime Minister Davis says if nothing reverses soon, Bahamians may find themselves becoming climate refugees or fed to the whims and ravages of hurricanes, despite the U.S. President Joe Biden signing the Inflation Reduction Act, which President Biden hailed as the most significant legislation in history to tackle climate change. Prime Minister Davis says it was obvious to him that the conflict in Ukraine was used as a cloak to not do what is necessary to prevent further emissions.
Now it's being said, I think with Senator Manchin, who is concerned about them not being able to produce more oil because of the disruption of supply in the world today. So we need to, as America, to look out for our self-interest, and we need to open up the coal mines again. We need to give more licenses out for drilling and exploring and production. But all that is counterproductive to the overall goal to which a commitment was made many years ago about the wealthiest countries in the world committed to put a fund together for $100 billion.
According to the Prime Minister, the commitment to provide the funding of $100 billion for small island developing states to be able to access for adapting and mitigating natural disasters intensified by climate change was not fulfilled. For Jcn News, I'm Cale Campbell.
Prime Minister Davis added that more than 50% of the Bahamas' national debt is connected directly to climate change, further explaining the process of having to borrow money for recovery purposes, with Hurricane Dorian costing more than $4 billion in losses and damages. The Prime Minister made mention of the upcoming United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP27, in Egypt in November, with the question, what has been done since these summits have been held? Prime Minister Davis says if nothing reverses soon, Bahamians may find themselves becoming climate refugees or fed to the whims and ravages of hurricanes. Despite U.S. President Joe Biden signing the Inflation Reduction Act, which President Biden hails as the most significant legislation in history to tackle climate change, Prime Minister Davis says it was obvious to him that the conflict in Ukraine was used as a cloak to not do what is necessary to prevent further emissions. According to Prime Minister Davis, the commitment to provide the funding of $100 billion for small island developing states to be able to access funding for adapting and mitigating natural disaster intensified by climate change was not fulfilled. Today marks the commencement of the specialized training of a cadre of newly engaged individuals who will serve as school attendance officers in the Ministry of Education, with the primary focus to assist the ministry's current school attendance unit in ensuring every child between the ages of 5 and 16 is attending school. Director of Education Marcellus Taylor telling the new officers of the importance of this mission.
As we all know, education is indeed the key for individuals to become the people that they ought to be. And also it's the key in order to build a strong and modern society. So there's no doubt about that. And that is why the global community has determined that education is not just something that we do as a privilege, but that it's a basic human right. It is a right, and it is our job to ensure that people are able to access that right. So whether they're Bahamian, whether they're from another nationality, as long as they live in the Bahamas, it is their right to an education. And going further, the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas say that if a child is between the ages of 5 and 16, and that when they say between 5 and 16 is when they turn 5, the September after they turn 5, all the way to the day that just before they become 17, right? They must be in school.
According to Education Minister Glenys Hannah Martin, the initial fallout of COVID-19, the pandemic, forced thousands of children and young people to stop attending school virtually and face-to-face. Hannah Martin says this recruitment is the manifestation of the minister's resolve to carry out the legal duty in the Education Act.
It is a legal obligation under the Education Act that children of compulsory age attend school. Parents have no discretion to cause for their compulsory school-age children ages 5 to 16 years to not attend school. Children must attend school, and parents must assure that their children attend. And under the Education Act, the minister has a duty to ensure that parents comply.
Acknowledging the absence from schools may often be as a result of deeper challenges, she says the Ministry of Education has provided various services to address those challenges.
Our social safety net support agencies, such as the Department of Social Services, such as special services, including guidance counselors, will collaborate to bring the necessary support. And they are represented in part here today as a demonstration of that commitment. Where we identify children who are at or near school leaving age. And in those circumstances, it may not be deemed pragmatic for those young people to re-enter the high school classroom. I urge those students and their parents to avail themselves of the opportunity for continuing education, including the newly launched Smart Start program by BTVI, offered free of charge.
Now, the recruitment of new officers is currently underway for Grand Bahama and the Family Islands as well. And finally, over the years, and especially during the summer months, there have been instances of food poisoning, especially when eating raw conch from some of our favorite locations like Potter's Key, Fish Fry at Arawak Key, along with the Montague and Blue Hills Roads fish markets. Last summer, several government agencies combined their efforts in a training program for food vendors at these locations to try and prevent further outbreaks. In this next report, we hear how effective the training program has been thus far. During the summer of 2021, the Ministry of Health, the Department of Environmental Health Services, and the Bahamas Agriculture, Health, and Food Safety Authority, led by Dr. Patricia Johnson, took a holistic approach to prevent cases of food poisoning, particularly when eating raw conch. They conducted extensive training on food handling and personal hygiene for all vendors. Love 97 and JCN spoke with Dr. Johnson on Monday and asked if she thinks the training program has been successful.
Well, apparently it has. We have not had any major reports that have come to the attention of BASA, and we do check with the surveillance unit at the Ministry of Health, and so we would not have had any report of any outbreak from them. So I would say that that information has worked.
Dr. Johnson says the Food Safety Authority has not received any reports of conch poisoning from the Ministry of Health so far this summer. She agrees that consumers can feel more comfortable knowing that vendors are now being held to a higher standard, but she also advises consumers to keep a close eye on how your conch is being prepared.
As a consumer, I would say yes, there is that level of confidence that they can have. Our vendors know what to do, and it's just a matter of them ensuring that they maintain that quality of service, especially with that raw conch, which tends to give us a little bit of trouble from time to time in terms of outbreaks, that they need to make sure that they handle it properly. And so I would just say to the public to always be very vigilant when purchasing raw conch items, ensure that the vendors rinsing that conch over fresh running water, and that they would be using live conch. The consumer has some of the onus is on them too to be very vigilant and to demand a certain level of service as it relates to food safety and quality and sanitation.
Dr. Johnson reminded that the Department of Environmental Health inspectors are responsible for ensuring the vendors follow the health and safety guidelines or face hefty fines that can reach up to $1,000 for each breach. Meanwhile, last summer there was an outbreak of conch poisoning at Potter's Key, with many speculating it was caused by the nearby water and sewage plant. However, after a lengthy investigation, Dr. Johnson said they were finally able to uncover the source of that outbreak.
The Ministry of Health, of course, would have been the agency that we would have been working with in that investigation. And, of course, the organism was the Vibrio parahemolyticus, which has been implemented in previous foodborne outbreaks related to the conch product. So we know how to deal with this organism. The primary way is through, of course, personal hygiene, but, of course, rinsing off that conch with slime and what have you over fresh running water, and even using a piece of lime as you're doing that to help remove that slime even better.
Dr. Johnson says the Bahamas Agriculture, Health, and Food Safety Authority plans to meet with the food vendors at Potter's Key, Arawak Key, Montague, and Blue Hills later this summer to further enforce the health and safety standards. And that'll do it for your Jcn Evening News. Once again, I'm Jcn Saunders. Thanks for joining us.
This segment of the news has been brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.